Now, in exchange for the returned hostages, Israel has released hundreds of Palestinians who had been detained in Israeli prisons. Many of them say they suffered abuse.
For hundreds of Palestinians released from Israeli prisons this month, coming home has been a mix of relief and devastation. Most were seized by Israeli troops during their Gaza ground offensive and held without charge, including Mohammed Abu Musa, a radiology technician who was taken in February last year.
They held us in the sports court without questioning us. I expected that there would be an investigation where they would try to understand and interrogate us. I thought that because this was an army entering a place, they would interrogate us and let us go.
Mohammed Abu Musa says he was abused by Israeli authorities while he was locked up.
The whole time we had to be on our knees as we were tortured. I will spare you the details. Beating with sticks, punching, humiliation, insults, threats to kill the family and similar things.
After he was finally released last week, Mohammed was told his mother, aunt, uncle, younger sister and her children were all killed in an Israeli airstrike in July. His account is not isolated. Many detainees have returned home to learn loved ones have been killed and have spoken of abuse behind bars.
We ask everyone to pray for all the young men still in prison. They are suffering, exhausted and struggling. Prison has become extremely difficult for people these days.
Human rights groups, the UN and detainees have reported routine abuse in Israeli detention facilities, including beatings and insufficient food. Israel says it adheres to its prison standards under law and investigates any reports of violations.
And we are now joined by Helena Sola Martin from the World Organization Against Torture. That's a consortium of several NGOs. Helena, why does Israel detain so many Palestinians and not charge them with anything?
Well, Israel has detained, to provide some background, since October 2023, at least 18,500 Palestinians, including many women and many children. But these numbers are probably much higher. And they are indeed arrested without charge. They are arrested under different regimes. They are arrested under the unlawful combatants law in Gaza, and also under administrative detention in the West Bank, and under counterterrorism laws. We are very afraid, profoundly afraid and concerned regarding the lack of safeguards applying in all these different detention settings. For instance, detainees can be held without access to a lawyer for up to 75 days, especially those in Gaza are under the unlawful combatants law. And that's very problematic because there's no contact with families for most of them. So actually they are detained under incommunicado detention for months. And who knows actually what happens while they are in detention, because as you may know, Israel has banned access to the International Red Cross, to the ICRC, and also to any other monitoring body for all this period. So it's really very, very troublesome. And the reports that we receive, indeed, they are very, very worrying when it comes not only to what has already been described in terms of beatings or also the lack of the bare minimum in terms of access to food, to medical care, but there's a deliberate practice of cruelty and violence applied on a very systematic basis. So now that I was listening to these testimonies, the reports that we received are absolutely consistent with that.
Now, how much accountability is there for the treatment of detainees in Israel?
So, unfortunately, there is not a single conviction of a soldier or any person within the Israeli prison system or the Israeli military system. Yet there's thousands of complaints that have been brought by members of our network, by many lawyers, but there's certainly very, very structural gaps when it comes to pursuing accountability, and there's a myriad of obstacles that makes accountability impossible.
Now, many of the prisoners that are coming back, they come back to a home that has been devastated by 2 years of war, as the person we've seen in our report. Is there any support for those people?
I mean, there are organizations that provide support to victims of torture and other ill treatment, but the needs are so high, and also the impacts are so irreparable and so large in scope as a policy of torture, and we can call it torture following, the collection of testimonies that we've received, many hundreds of them. The problem is that, the needs are so tremendous that even if there's some limited organizations that provide this work, we would actually need to set up a much more, like a large-scale system to support all these persons that have, that went through these dire conditions of detention, and not only the conditions of detention, but also a systematic pattern and practices of torture and ill-treatment that may include dog attacks, solitary confinement for very long period, threats of killing family members, sexual abuse and rape, including the insertion of objects in genitalia or private parts. So, and there is a long list of brutal practices that we have sadly documented.
Helena Sola there from the World Organization Against Torture in Geneva. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Well, let's look at the issue of returned prisoners now with Guy Shalev, who is Executive Director of the Prisoners and Detainees Department at Physicians for Human Rights Israel. He joins us from Tel Aviv. Welcome to DW. We have heard and seen the report, these reports of routine abuse in Israeli detention. Do those testimonies match the research that you've conducted?
Right. So we've been documenting and publishing about that issue for more than a year and a half, and still we haven't seen any response in terms of demanding accountability from Israel or even stopping this atrocity. What we're now seeing is bodies returning to Gaza with signs of torture, and that's another sign, another reflection of what we know happens inside Israeli incarceration facilities for the past 2 years. This is just a continuing disaster that had all the world and anyone who really cares about the rights of prisoners and the rights of human rights in general should have stopped that long time ago. And we're still having thousands and thousands of Palestinians held in Israeli facilities in that same conditions.
Okay, so do you believe then that this is unofficial Israeli policy, or are there renegades within the system who are getting away with this?
This is definitely an official policy, and we know that not because that's how we analyze things or that's how we see them, because the policymakers in Israel were very clear in saying that. Minister Ben-Gvir, who is the Minister of National Security, he's in charge of the Israeli prison service, was very clear that the Israeli prison service is not only incarcerating facilities, limiting their freedom as their punishment. Again, these are people who were never put to court or indicted, but also the conditions in which the IPS and other and the military facilities hold these people are a part of the punishment of them being terrorists, or them being, as Ben-Gvir and many Israelis would want to generalize all of them as being the Nukhba, the Hamas unit who participated in October 7. So this is very out there, outspoken, and it's not just the policymakers. It's also all the mechanisms in Israel that are supposed to supervise what's happening in prisons.
And on that point, on that point, when Israel says that it adheres to its prison standards under law and investigates any reports of violations, what do you say?
That is clearly not true. We haven't seen any investigations in place. Just one investigation on a very publicized case of a sexual assault of one detainee. Other than that, we haven't seen anything. But there's also mechanisms that are supposed to protect prisoners and detainees even before investigations. And that's all kind of oversight mechanisms. The International Committee of the Red Cross is supposed to have access to each and every facility. And since October 7, Israel has blocked that access. Without the ICRC coming into these facilities, we have no idea what's the conditions, what's the medical condition of people, what are their needs. Only we get that from testimonies we're collecting for prisoners through lawyers' visit that were already also blocked for many, many months.
So and what reason does Israel give to stop the International Red Cross from doing these inspections?
They're saying that because the ICRC is not getting access to Israeli hostages in Gaza, then it will not get access to Palestinian prisoners. This is really a distorted logic because this is not how international law works. It's not how morality works. People are held in facilities and need to be protected. I mean, of course, it's horrible that hostages were held in Gaza for so long in such dire conditions, but it has no, it says nothing about what the rights of prisoners in Israel should have. And also, it's also important to mention that now, when Israeli hostages are freed, still the ICRC is not getting access. So even that argument that the ICRC is not getting access is not valid anymore.
Thanks for joining us, Guy Shalev from Physicians for Human Rights Israel.
Thank you.